Okay, so I want to talk to you about the dark forest today and what it is and why you end up there. And the main thing I want to show you is that there's nothing wrong with you if you find yourself in that super scary place. It is a near universal experience, and particularly when you are actually trying to do something ambitious and important to you and new for you. There's something that's hard. So here's how stories happen, and other kinds of work. The the beginning of a new project is that you are paying attention to your attention. You get a new idea, you think of something, and then you kind of dive deep into that thing. You really focus on it and you start collecting stuff. This is the creative engine phase of collect, gather all this stuff up. You start talking about it, and you continue to build pieces for this thing. As you continue to move along, you're in the collect phase, you start going into the decide phase, the act phase. No matter how deep the subject is, you just keep going and you find little connections, you start putting things together, it's amazing, and it starts to become something new. But at the same time, you start digging yourself deeper and deeper into this project. It gets more and more complex. It also gets scarier and scarier. The best work comes from an accretion of all these different kinds of things, the deepest work, the most exciting work. The problem is that at some point, you're going to have this massive pile of research and backstory and drafts and outlines, and what do you do with it all? So when I was working on my book Out on the Wire in 2013, as I was doing the research and writing phase, I found myself with a file of over 200,000 words of transcripts and notes in a somewhat random structure. And my script was due in 3 months. So, I was in way over my head, and I kind of hit a wall. I felt like I'm never going to be able to put this thing together. I would have conversations with my mom and my husband, Matt, saying like, why don't I just like put together a really great compilation of these interviews because they're so great, and these people know so much more than I do. I had definitely struggled before, but compared to what I was going through in 2013, anything previous had been kind of insignificant in some sense. I mean, this is just the outline. This is like me putting the outline together and like color coding, chopping it up, putting it on the floor, trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I was really deep in the dark forest, but I didn't know what that was. I didn't understand that this is a necessary phase of creative work. So the name The Dark Forest comes from Jad Abumrad of Radiolab. And he actually calls it something a little bit different for this reason. Basically, he was asked in, I don't know, some of the mid-aughts or something like that, early aughts, if he wanted, before Radiolab, if he wanted to create an audio story on Wagner's Ring Cycle. And this is something I found as I was digging through my tape. I listened to this story and I started to recognize elements of it, because basically he didn't know what to do. He was working through his own I'm not sure if you can actually hear that audio, so I'm going to skip that. But basically, he was very he was ambitious to do this story. It sounded like a great idea, but he didn't really know anything about it. And he started compiling all this research and everything, got in way over his head, blew a bunch of deadlines, felt like he was just going to die, essentially. But eventually found his way out of what he came to call the German forest because of Wagner. Now, nobody knows where that comes from and doesn't make any sense outside of the sort of in-joke context of Radiolab, so I just call it the Dark Forest, which I think really makes sense. And I did an interview also in August of 2012, which I found in 2013 as I was writing, with Robert Smith and Zoe Chase of Planet Money. And they were so wise about this. They were right in the middle of a dark forest and a series of really big stories having to do with China, where they'd gathered all this stuff and they were trying to sort their way through it. And what they said, and they were kind of tag teaming this and going back and forth, they said, everyone who does a story, there'll be a moment where we think it's a bad idea. We'll say it out loud. Why did we volunteer in the meeting? We thought it was exciting. Should we throw this away? And basically they're like, should we send you a postcard? Like, why don't we write a postcard to your future self? And I will mail it to you in 6 months. so that when you're in the dark forest, you're going to get that postcard, and really have like that conversation with Zoe and Robert was like a postcard. It was like that postcard because I actually found it 6 months or 8 months later, and it was like they were telling me exactly what I needed to hear in that moment. I'm not crazy. Feeling this way doesn't mean I'm not suited to be a writer or a cartoonist. It's just what happens to everybody. I did get out. It was a long and scary process, but I did actually finish. And that is what I want to bring to you. I think it's really, really important to understand that. Later, as I was working on the podcast for Out on the Wire, I discovered this tweet from Kazu Kibuishi, and I realized he was talking about the dark forest. And you can see how popular it is. It's a very popular tweet. Creative process. This is going to be awesome. This is hard. This is terrible. Number 4, I'm terrible. Number 5, hey, not bad. Number 6, that was awesome. Now, the great thing about this is that Kazu is, in just a few words, describing that entire sequence of events. And by chance, as I was flailing around later on, trying to get a handle on how one runs a business and, other stuff that I was learning later, I happened on this chart. So, you're seeing, first of all, you see, Jad Abumrad talking about it. You see Robert and Zoe talking about it. I was experiencing it myself. Then I see Kazu talking about it. And then I see this. And this is called The Change Curve by Kelly and Connor. It's a little bit hard to see on the blue, but it says stage 1, uninformed optimism. That's when you get into the project because you're like, this is amazing. And then you're paying attention to your tension. Informed pessimism is when you start to get like, ooh, this is kind of complicated. And then you get into the dark forest and notice these arrows in the middle checking out, right? And then hopeful realism, like you realize how hard it is, but you can get through it. And then informed optimism as you're close to the edge, the end, and then completion. Well, some clever monkey turned it around, and this valley of despair model, which I found elsewhere, really resonates more than a friendly hill that you're going up. So, informed pessimism and phase 3 is valley of despair. That is the I'm terrible phase. That is the dark forest right there. And little note there, most people quit here in the pit of despair. Found another one, transition curve. These are all things that I found in the context of entrepreneurialism and building a business. So my point being that the dark forest happens everywhere all the time. This version has been adopted all over as the entrepreneur's journey or transition curve. They just look super, super familiar. And I want you to note this part. This is the crash and burn part. This is the part where you give up. There are no guarantees you're going to make it through the dark forest. But if you understand that is what's happening to you, you have a better shot at it because you're able to actually pull those things together. You see that you're on a curve, you're in the nadir of the curve, you're going to get out. It's a decision point. So if you can identify the dark forest, you can say, am I committed to this? Is this a project that I really want to be doing? Is this a sunk cost situation where I want out now? You're able to make that choice. It is your choice. And can you go, alternately from, this is terrible and I'm terrible to, hey, not bad. So the thing that I want you to take note of is from I'm terrible to, hey, not bad. That's one step. Like that's the next step. It's right in front of you. The ability to get through the dark forest and get to the next step is right there. So that's the critical moment. Whenever you're making a large, complex work of any kind, visual work, written work, building a business, anything, there's so many moving parts that go into it. There's so many conceptual parts and there's technical parts. And at some point you have taken all those things in, but you don't understand how to put them in order yet. You're trying to make something new in the world. You're trying to make something you've never made before. And so it's confusing and it's overwhelming, and it should be, because if it's not confusing and overwhelming, you're not really trying that hard. So the putting it in order is a whole phase of the work. That is the decide phase of the creative engine. It's the reflect phase of the creative engine, which are the two phases that are most often skipped of the creative engine. They're the parts that people mostly think don't exist, and they just go straight from collect more and more stuff, act, try to make it work without getting reflective, without really thinking about what they have. And that is the key, is that reflection and decision making. So that dip in the middle to the next step is actually a huge leap. There's a big gap there. But the thinking process is where you grow. So just want to say again, if what you're doing is deep, if it's worth doing, it's going to be hard. So I didn't see it when I was working on the book. I wasn't ready to see that. But later it would really help me a lot. And you need to know that this is a turning point, and it's not something that you do as a lone genius. You have to do this by talking to people, by getting help to reflect, just, even just reflecting yourself, but like sort of using yourself as your own sounding board can help, but having other people on the outside is so much more helpful. So you just don't get stuck lying on the rug being miserable. The big thing I want to bring to you is the idea of the edit from the from Out on the Wire, which is where people share their work and then critique the work live together, and talk about what can be done and what are the issues and what are you facing. And I adopted this idea of the edit as what I call a focus session, which is actually quite a bit more, it's smaller, like lower stakes, whatever. And essentially it's a time when you kind of are talking through the issues that you face with somebody. So that is what I wanted to share with you today, this idea of being able to rely on other people, to consult other people, to help you get through that moment of uncertainty and that really emotionally challenging moment of the dark forest. Knowing that it's there for a reason can really help, and then knowing that you do not have to do it alone. You don't have to get through it alone. You can legitimately try to bounce ideas off other people, work through your ideas with other people. It's immensely, immensely useful, and I really recommend it. Okay, I'm back, and we're just going to talk a little bit, and I'm going to open up to questions about the Dark Forest. I feel like that video kind of like went over the main things I want to say about it. The main thing, the main piece of this I want you to understand is that this is a necessary and important part of the creative process, that it's normal, that if you are experiencing it, it's not because you are incapable, it's not because you are good at this, it's not because you there's something inherently amiss. It's because you have actually done a lot of work and pulled a lot of things together, and pulling all those things into like this giant pile. Like, you have to start making connections between those things. You have to make decisions. You have to be in the decide phase. And it's not just like, oh, well, I feel so bad because I'm so bad at the decide phase, and so I haven't actually done the thing. That's not really the issue. It's like, you have to know what to decide. And I think the way out of the dark forest is not like suddenly everything is beautiful and perfect, but that you have this opportunity to make tiny decisions about tiny things, and with the reflect phase of the creative engine, see that you're making progress. Instead of just feeling like, I've done nothing, I know nothing, nothing's working, it's all horrible, right? So again, using the creative engine, you can really lock into this idea that making tiny decisions, making tiny steps forward is real progress. And you look at that and reflect it and go, oh, I did make progress, even though the whole thing still feels totally overwhelming. I'm still in the forest. And making those tiny decisions is what you do when you do a focus session. Like, when you get together with somebody and do a focus session, then you you can sort of talk through some tiny decision you need to make. And what you're doing then is you have all this stuff in the mess, and you pick this little thing, you pick this little thing, you put them together, you decide these go together, and you make something out of that. And that then becomes like scaffolding for your next step. Like, what is the next thing you need to do? What is the next piece of the puzzle you need to figure out? And that's how you start moving forward. That's how you start building the path out of the forest, is by making those decisions and taking tiny actions and recognizing that that is real all the way through the process. So I am going to open up to questions here. I think I'm actually talking to you and you're actually hearing the audio. Not 100% sure, but it sounds like it because I'm getting responses in the chat. If you have any questions about this, I've got a few more minutes here. And let's see. Ev says, how can you figure out that mystery of how can you figure out that the misery getting stuck in the dark forest and all the energy of getting out again is really worth it? And she says, okay, I didn't really read Why Bother yet. Well,
Why Bother will help. I mean, the Jen Loudon book we talked about yesterday will help with this. But I think that if your creative work is something that you know is important to you, then it is worth going through this process, whether or not the end result ends up something that is quote unquote worth it by some external standard. I mean, is it going to make you money with whatever? Because what you're doing as you go through that process is you are growing as an artist and you're growing as a human. You're making new neurological, electrical connections between the neurons, and they're going to be really helpful to you. That new stuff that goes on in your brain is going to be something that helps you come up with new ideas. And so even if this idea doesn't turn out, other ones will. So the process of creating and finishing projects is worth it on its own, for its own sake, even if the end result of the project is something that doesn't quite do what you hoped it would do. So takeaway number one, thank you for popping your takeaways in right away. I want to remind everybody before I forget, takeaways in the comments thread. Mini habits, mini steps, mini decisions, small actions, it all builds up. Absolutely what I want you to learn from this is that, when you acknowledge the small things that you're doing and the way you're moving forward, when you see the patterns and you put these things together, you can start trusting the system, trusting that you know what you're doing and that you're going to get to the end. That helps calm your anxiety, keep going. So all those things are incredibly important. Christine says, what do you do if you don't have collaborators? I'm not talking about I had literal collaborators on the Out on the Wire podcast. I had, Ben Frisch, my producer, and we would talk together. But I'm talking about just finding a friend, basically, who is a smart person, who is, alert in the world and the kind of person you would want to be the end consumer of your work, the reader, the looker, adder, whatever, whoever is the person who you want to be there, that's the person you want to have a focus session with. So it's not about having full-time collaborators. It's just about having an intelligent leader to listen, somebody who's going to listen to you and let you reflect off of them. Julia says scaffolding. Yes, scaffolding is very, very important. Ruth points out Gills' friends comments on a public video, this one in the first for our group, are public on the internet, not just shared with you. That is true. They are public. That's why I said they're on the page. I'm sorry I didn't say that more specifically, but they are public. I think that we're doing okay so far as sharing private information, but please be aware. Okay, so I just wanted to, takeaway, good takeaways. Takeaway, don't panic. This is an integral, necessary part of the process. From Christine, Liz, takeaway, small decisions and small actions are real progress and will help you through. Yes. Julia says, truly, there are no wasted experiences. Absolutely. And Bonnie says, sometimes when I'm in the dark forest, I want to ask someone else to come in and take the next steps for me. But it sounds like in order to grow, I really just need to articulate the problems and take those next steps myself. Yes. In order to grow those new neurological connections between, one thought and another thought, you have to actually do the work. And that is sort of like the going through the gap thing. All right, so this is, I think, one of those things where community can really help and can really support you because it is a really emotional moment in your overall, process. I definitely want to encourage you guys to continue working with the Gills Book Club. It's going to be open for another week. I'll be back on Monday with a piece with the chapter about resistance. And the next 3 meetings are going to be public because these are things that are relevant to everybody, just so you know. You can share with anybody who isn't in the Gills Book Club as well. And I want to encourage everybody to take a look at the Creative Focus Workshop as a next step for this. This join link will offer you a discount on the enrollment, and also the Creative Engine Masterclass is there. You can find that there as well. So I'd like to encourage you guys to go there because I really feel like that is the most logical next step here. If you're really struggling with this stuff, if you're really working through all these questions, this is what I have to offer in terms of helping. Okay, so thanks for being here, you guys. Thanks for being patient with my tech experiments. I'm glad at least some of them worked out really well. And I will see you on Monday and probably go back to our normal format, non-slideshow format on Monday. Thanks for saying that, Annette. This has been great hanging out with you guys, and I will see you next week. Have a great weekend. Don't forget to do your weekly review and really spend some time appreciating what it is that you do and celebrating it and thinking about what you want to do next